I stood in that alley behind the Meridian Tower, rain mixing with something else on my face, and I couldn't tell anymore what was water and what was me falling apart. The flowers, white roses, her favorite, were scattered across the grimy concrete like pieces of a marriage I'd just watched die. My name is Marcus Thompson. I'm 50 years old. And 5 years ago, in downtown Atlanta, I learned that the woman I'd built my whole life around had been living a lie so big, so complete, that everyone knew about it except me. Tell me where you're watching this from, because what I'm about to share might sound like fiction, but I swear on everything I've lost. It's the truest thing I've ever told. I'd gone to surprise Elena at her office that Tuesday afternoon. Anniversary. 5 years married. 8 years together. I had the flowers, reservations at Soto Soto, that Italian place on Iman Park she'd been talking about for months. I was proud of myself for remembering, for planning something romantic, despite how tight money had gotten since I'd taken that job at the community center. The security guard in the marble lobby had looked at me with these eyes, tired, sad eyes, and told me Mrs. Chen was in a meeting on the executive floor. He said if I went around back, there was a service entrance, and I could wait in the break room on the third floor where it was more comfortable than standing in the lobby like some forgotten appointment. I remember thinking it was odd, uncomfortable even, but I trusted him. He seemed kind. So I walked out of that pristine lobby with its waterfall feature and fresh orchids, and I went around back to the alley. And that's where my life split in two, the before and the after. The man who believed and the man who knew. The alley smelled like garbage and wet cardboard. Dumpsters lined one side, and shipping crates were stacked against the brick walls. The metal door was propped open with a brick, and inside, the fluorescent lights flickered over cracked linoleum that looked like it hadn't been replaced since the 90s. Nothing like the marble and glass out front. I climbed the service stairs, my dress shoes echoing in the concrete stairwell, and that's when I heard them. Two women talking on the third floor landing. Can't believe they're promoting her again. The first voice was sharp, bitter, like black coffee left too long on the burner. 5 years. It took me 5 years to make senior analyst. She did it in 18 months. The second voice carried something worse than bitterness. It carried resignation. I stopped climbing. Something in my chest tightened. Well, when your husband is David Chen, doors open. You know he's on the board of directors, right? Recommended her for every position she's ever gotten here. The flowers felt heavy in my hands. David Chen. Elena had mentioned him. Her mentor, she'd called him. The man who saw her potential when no one else did. My cousin works in HR. Said the nepotism is so blatant, it's embarrassing. The woman barely shows up, but somehow closes the biggest deals. Because David hands them to her on a silver platter. The roses slipped from my fingers. They hit the stairs and scattered, white petals against gray concrete, and I watched them fall like I was watching from somewhere else, like I was already a ghost in my own life. David Chen, Elena Chen, the same last name. A coincidence, she'd told me once, laughing it off. Chen is like Smith in Chinese families, Marcus. It's nothing. But it wasn't nothing. It was everything. I thought about 5 years of marriage, 8 years together. How I'd supported every decision, every opportunity. how I'd moved from Charlotte to Atlanta because her career demanded it, how I'd left my job at the marketing firm where I was about to make director to take a position at the community center that paid half as much because she needed to focus on her demanding schedule. How she'd made me feel small and insecure every time I suggested maybe she'd had some advantages, insisting that every achievement was earned through her brilliance, her work ethic, her talent alone. She'd never mentioned David was on the board, never mentioned their relationship went beyond her department, never mentioned that this mentor had been paving her path with gold while I paved mine with good intentions and diminishing returns. I descended those stairs slowly, leaving the flowers where they'd fallen like a crime scene I couldn't bear to disturb. Outside, the rain had turned serious, the kind of Atlanta rain that comes down like it's got a grudge. I stood there, in that alley, letting it soak through my jacket, through my shirt, down to my skin, and I pulled out my phone. Elena's last text glowed on the screen. Another late night, don't wait up, love you. I deleted it without responding. That security guard's eyes made sense now. Not kindness, pity. Everyone knew, everyone had always known. The wives at company events who'd looked at me with those sad smiles. The colleagues who'd gotten quiet when I'd joined conversations. The way Elena's assistant could never quite meet my eyes. Everyone except me. Let me take you back to where this all started, because you need to understand something. I loved this woman. I mean, really loved her. The kind of love that makes you stupid, makes you blind, makes you believe in fairy tales. When you're a grown man who should know better. Yeah, I met Elena Chen in 2015 at a marketing conference in Charlotte. I was 37 years old, working my way up at Henderson and Associates, and I'd just landed the biggest client of my career, a regional hospital system worth $3 million in annual billing. I was on top of the world, walking through that conference hall like I owned the place. And then I saw her. She was standing by the coffee station, struggling with one of those industrial dispensers that was spitting more steam than coffee. And when she laughed at her own frustration, something in my chest shifted. She had this laugh that was musical but not delicate, real, human. She wore a navy blue dress and her hair was pulled back in a bun. And when our eyes met, she smiled like she'd been waiting for me to notice her. "These machines hate me," she said, and I stepped in to help, because that's what you do when you want an excuse to talk to someone beautiful. "They hate everyone," I told her, and I got that thing working, and we talked for 20 minutes that turned into an hour, that turned into dinner that night at a steakhouse downtown. She told me she'd just moved to Charlotte from San Francisco, that she was starting fresh at a consulting firm, that she was ready for something real after years of failed relationships. She asked about my work, my family, my dreams, and she listened like every word mattered. I told her about growing up in West Charlotte, about my mother who cleaned houses to put me through college, about my younger sister Janine who was teaching 4th grade in Durham. Elena's eyes got soft when I talked about Mama, and she reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Your mother raised a good man," she said. 3 months later, we were inseparable. She'd come to my apartment after work, and we'd cook together. She'd make these dumplings from scratch, while I'd handle the greens and cornbread. and we'd blend our cultures on one table and laugh at how good it tasted. On weekends, we'd drive to the mountains or walk through Freedom Park, and she'd hold my hand, like she was afraid I might disappear. I introduced her to Janine, who pulled me aside after dinner and said, "That one's special, Marcus. Don't mess it up." I introduced her to my boys from college, Darnell and Troy, and they gave me the nod of approval that meant more than any blessing. When I proposed, I did it right. Took her to the Mint Museum, where we'd had our first real date, got down on one knee in front of the Rodin sculpture she loved, and when I opened that box with the ring I'd saved 6 months to afford, she cried so hard that security came over to make sure she was okay. Yes, she kept saying. Yes, yes, yes. We got married at my mama's church, Little Rock AMA. 6 months later, and Elena wore a simple white dress that cost more than my car, but I didn't care because she looked like every promise I'd ever made to God was coming true. The first year of marriage was good. Better than good. We had our routines. I'd wake up early, make coffee the way she liked it, light and sweet, and bring it to her in bed. She'd wrap her arms around my neck and tell me I was the best thing that ever happened to her. We'd both head to work, and in the evenings we'd decompress together, talking about our days, making plans for the future. She wanted kids. I wanted kids. We'd talk about names. Maya, if it was a girl, after my grandmother. James, if it was a boy, after her father, who'd passed when she was young. Everything felt possible. Then one night in November 2016, Elena came home with news that changed everything. She sat me down at our kitchen table, grabbed both my hands, and her eyes were shining with excitement I'd never seen before. "Marcus, baby, I have to tell you something. David Chen, my boss, he's been promoted to the board of directors, and he wants to bring me with him to Atlanta, to Meridian Tower. It's a huge opportunity. Senior analyst position, 70,000 more than I'm making now." I remember my stomach dropping. Atlanta was 4 hours away. My whole life was in Charlotte. My job, my mama, Janine, my boys. But when I looked at Elena's face, so hopeful and electric with possibility, what was I supposed to say? This was her dream. This was her chance. "When would we have to move?" I asked. "End of January." "I know it's fast, Marcus. I know this is asking a lot. But this could change our lives. We could buy a house, start our family." "Baby, this is everything we've been working toward." That night, I held her while she slept, and I stared at the ceiling, wondering if love was supposed to feel like sacrifice, or if I was just making excuses for giving up everything I'd built. But I told myself that's what marriage was. Compromise, support, being each other's biggest champion. I had no idea I was signing up to be her footnote. The move to Atlanta happened faster than I could process. One day, I was clearing out my desk at Henderson and Associates. My boss looking at me like I'd lost my mind for leaving right when I was about to make director. And the next day, I was driving a U-Haul down I-85 with everything we owned packed behind me and Elena following in her Honda, music probably blasting, dreaming about her new empire. We found an apartment in Midtown. One of those modern buildings with floor-to-ceiling windows and a doorman who wore a suit nicer than anything I owned. The rent was astronomical, $3,000 a month for 2 bedrooms, but Elena said it was necessary. Image matters in consulting, Marcus. Clients need to see we're successful. I didn't argue, even though it meant most of her new salary was going toward keeping up appearances, while I scrambled to find work in a city where I knew nobody. For 3 months, I sent out resumes. I had 15 years of experience, a strong portfolio, references that glowed, but Atlanta's marketing scene was different from Charlotte's. Younger, more competitive. Companies wanted digital natives, not a 40-something black man from Carolina who specialized in traditional media and relationship building. I got close a few times, second-round interviews, promising conversations, but nothing landed. Meanwhile, Elena was thriving. She'd come home at 8, 9, 10 at night, buzzing with stories about her day, about the deals she was working, about David and how brilliant he was, how much he was teaching her, how lucky she felt to have a mentor who believed in her. He told me I'm the most talented analyst he's worked with in 20 years, she said one night, her eyes shining as she kicked off her heels. Marcus, this is happening. Everything we dreamed about is happening. I was sitting on our expensive couch, in our expensive apartment, looking at my laptop where another rejection email had just arrived, and I smiled, because that's what you do when your wife is winning and you're drowning. I'm proud of you, baby, I said, and I meant it. But I also felt something else. Something darker that I pushed down because good husbands don't get jealous of their wife's success. Finally, in May 2017, I got an offer. Youth Development Coordinator at the West Side Community Center in Atlanta's West End. The job was noble, working with kids from rough neighborhoods, running after-school programs, mentoring boys who reminded me of myself at 13. The pay was $38,000. I'd been making $85,000 at Henderson and Associates, on track to make 6 figures. Elena had encouraged me to take it. Baby, it's perfect for you, she said when I told her about it. You're so good with people. And it's not about the money. We're fine financially. This is about you finding purpose, while I build the foundation for our future. So I took the job. I showed up every day at 7:30 in the morning to a building that smelled like old gym shoes and Pine Sol, and I worked with kids who had nothing but dreams and obstacles. And I told myself I was making a difference, even as my bank account shrank and my sense of self got smaller. Elena would tell people at parties, at her company events where everyone wore designer and spoke in acronyms I didn't understand. Marcus works with at-risk youth. He's got such a big heart. And people would smile at me like I was a charity case she'd taken on, like I was her good deed. The thing about sacrifice is it starts small. You give a little, then a little more, and before you know it, you've given everything. And you're not sure what's left of yourself. I gave up my career trajectory. I gave up proximity to my family. Mama was getting older. Her diabetes was acting up. And I wasn't there to help Janine manage her care. I gave up my friend group, my church community, the city where I'd built my name. And Elena kept rising. 6 months after we moved, she made senior analyst. A year after that, associate director. 18 months after we arrived in Atlanta, she was pulling in $160,000 a year plus bonuses, while I was making $38,000 and feeling grateful for it because at least I had something. She bought herself a BMW. Silver, sleek, the kind of car that turns heads. She started wearing designer suits, carrying bags that cost more than my monthly paycheck. When I'd suggest maybe we could save some of that money, start a college fund for the kids we kept saying we'd have, she'd get defensive. I work hard for this, Marcus. You don't understand the pressure I'm under. David expects excellence. The clients expect excellence. I can't show up looking like I shop at Target. But here's the thing I couldn't say out loud. I did shop at Target. I wore the same 3 pairs of work pants for 2 years. I drove a 2008 Camry with a dent in the passenger door and a check engine light that had been on so long I'd stopped noticing it. And I was supposed to be okay with that because she was building our future, even though our future kept looking more like her future while I disappeared into the background. The late nights got more frequent. She'd text me at 5. Stuck in a meeting. Don't wait for dinner. At 7, client dinner ran long, might be midnight. At 9, working from David's office, we're closing a huge deal. I'll be really late. I'd sit in our expensive apartment, eating takeout alone, watching TV shows I didn't care about, and I'd tell myself this was temporary, that once she made partner, once she hit whatever milestone was next, things would slow down and we'd get back to being us. But we never did. One night in August 2018, I drove to her office around 10 because she'd been gone since 6 that morning, and I was worried. I wanted to bring her food, make sure she was okay. When I got to Meridian Tower, the lobby was empty except for a night security guard who looked at me with this expression I couldn't quite read. I told him I was there to see my wife, Elena Chen. He hesitated, then picked up a phone and made a call. A minute later, he hung up and shook his head. She's in a meeting, sir. She asked if you could head home. She'll be there soon. I stood there holding a bag of Chinese food that was getting cold, and something in that guard's eyes, pity maybe, or awkwardness, made my stomach turn. But I nodded, said thank you, and left. She came home at 2 in the morning, smelling like expensive wine and someone else's cologne. And when I asked if everything was okay, she snapped at me. I'm exhausted, Marcus. I just closed a $12 million deal. Can I please just go to bed without an interrogation? I didn't ask again. By 2019, our marriage had become a performance. We'd go to her company events, quarterly galas at hotels downtown where champagne flowed, and everyone talked about quarterly earnings and market penetration like it was poetry. And we'd hold hands and smile, and she'd introduce me as my husband, Marcus. He does incredible work with youth. And I'd stand there in my one good suit while men in Tom Ford sizing me up like I was the help. I'd shake hands with David Chen, this tall man with silver hair and a handshake that lasted exactly 1 second too short to be respectful, and he'd say things like, "Good to see you, Marcus," without ever really looking at me. Elena would light up around David. That's the thing I started noticing. At home, she was tired, irritable, checked out. But at these events, when David walked into a room, she became animated. Her laugh got louder. Her smile got brighter. She'd touch his arm when she talked, lean in when he spoke, and if I mentioned it later, carefully, gently, because I didn't want to sound crazy, she'd act like I was inventing problems. He's my mentor, Marcus. That's how professional relationships work. You're being insecure. So I swallowed it. I swallowed the late nights and the canceled plans and the way she'd fallen asleep on the couch in her work clothes too many times to count. I swallowed the fact that we hadn't had sex in 4 months because she was always too tired, too stressed, too focused on some deadline that was always urgent. I swallowed the growing distance between us like medicine I didn't want to take, but believed would eventually make me feel better. My mama noticed something was wrong. She came to visit in March 2019, staying with us for a week, and on her third day there, she sat me down while Elena was at work. We were in the kitchen of that expensive apartment, and Mama made me coffee the old way, in a pot on the stove, and she looked at me with eyes that had seen too much of life to be fooled by anyone's act. "Baby, where's your wife?" she asked. "She's working, Mama. You know how demanding her job is." "Mm-hmm." Mama sipped her coffee slowly. "And where's my son? Because the man sitting in front of me looks like Marcus. But he don't have Marcus's light anymore." I tried to laugh it off, but Mama wasn't having it. "Don't play with me, baby. I raised you. I know when you're hurting. That woman got you out here looking like you, apologizing for existing. When's the last time she cooked you a meal? When's the last time she asked how you're doing? Really doing?" I couldn't answer because I couldn't remember. "Listen to me," Mama said, and her voice got that tone it used to have when I was little and needed to hear hard truths. Love ain't supposed to make you small. Love ain't supposed to make you disappear. If you given everything and she ain't giving nothing back, that ain't love, baby. That's servitude. I told Mama she didn't understand, that Elena was under pressure, that she was building something big, that I needed to be patient. But after Mama left, her words stayed with me like a song I couldn't stop humming. The cracks started showing in ways I couldn't ignore anymore. Bills piled up despite Elena's big salary. She was spending faster than she was earning. Designer clothes, expensive dinners, spa weekends with her colleagues. When I suggested we needed to budget better, she'd say I didn't understand what it took to maintain her position. "These things are investments, Marcus. Networking requires resources." Meanwhile, I was picking up extra shifts at the community center, teaching weekend workshops, running a summer program. Anything to contribute more than my embarrassing salary could cover. The kids at the center started calling me Mr. Marcus, and some of them, boys like Darius and Jamal and Terrell, who didn't have fathers around, they started looking up to me. They'd wait after program just to talk, to get advice about school, or girls, or their futures. I'd drive some of them home because the bus routes were dangerous after dark, and their mothers would thank me with tears in their eyes because someone was showing up for their sons. That work mattered. It filled something in me that had been empty since we moved to Atlanta. But it also highlighted what was missing at home: purpose, partnership, presence. Elena didn't ask about my day anymore. She didn't ask about the kids I was working with, or the programs I was developing. When I'd try to share a story about Terrell getting accepted to a magnet school, or Darius writing a poem that made me cry, she'd nod while scrolling through her phone, offering distracted, "That's great, baby," responses that felt like doors closing. One Saturday in June 2019, I came home from a weekend workshop to find Elena getting dressed for another company dinner. This was the fourth one that month. I was tired, physically exhausted from 12 hours of managing 50 teenagers at a leadership retreat, and something in me cracked. "I thought we could have dinner together tonight," I said. "It's been 3 weeks since we sat down and just talked." Elena was at the mirror. putting on earrings that cost more than I made in a week. She met my eyes in the reflection. "Marcus, I told you about this dinner on Monday. David's introducing me to potential clients from Singapore. This could lead to a promotion to director level. You know how important this is. And what about us? Is us important?" She turned around, and her expression shifted to something I'd seen more and more lately. Annoyance mixed with pity. "You're being dramatic. We're fine. This is temporary, until I make partner. Then things will slow down." "You said that a year ago, Elena. And the year before that?" "Well, maybe if you understood what it takes to be successful in this field, you wouldn't be questioning me every time I have a work obligation." The words hit like fists. I stood there, in my community center, t-shirt and jeans, looking at this woman in her designer dress who used to hold my hand like it was precious. And I realized I didn't recognize her anymore. Or maybe I finally recognized who she'd been all along. She left without kissing me goodbye. That night, I called Darnell. He was still in Charlotte, married now with 2 kids, working as an engineer. We'd kept in touch through texts, mostly, occasional phone calls. But that night, I needed to hear a friendly voice. Someone who knew me before I became an accessory to someone else's ambition. "Man, what happened to you?" Darnell asked after I'd told him everything. "The Marcus I knew would never let himself get treated like this." "I love her, D. You don't just give up on love. Love ain't one-sided, brother. Love is partnership. What you got sounds like you working for her approval, and she ain't even paying you in respect." After we hung up, I sat in the dark living room of our expensive apartment, and I let myself admit something I'd been avoiding for 2 years. I was lonely. Lonelier than I'd been when I was single. Because at least when you're alone, you expect the emptiness. When you're married to someone who makes you feel invisible, the emptiness becomes a wound that won't heal. I found myself looking at old photos on my phone, pictures of us from Charlotte, from when her eyes looked at me like I hung the moon, pictures from our wedding where she'd cried into my shoulder and whispered that she'd never loved anyone the way she loved me, pictures from our first apartment where we'd eaten ramen on the floor because we couldn't afford furniture yet, and we'd been happy because we had each other. When did that change? When did I become inconvenient instead of essential? I didn't have answers that night. Something shifted in me. A quiet rebellion. A decision that I couldn't name yet, but could feel taking root. I was going to pay attention now. Really pay attention. Not to be suspicious or paranoid, but because I deserved to know the truth about my own life. Whatever that truth turned out to be. The truth started revealing itself in small ways. The kind of details you miss when you're trying hard to believe everything's fine. It was August 2019 when I first noticed the phone thing. Elena had always been on her phone for work. Emails, calls, texts. But now she was protective of it. She'd take it into the bathroom when she showered. She'd sleep with it face down on her nightstand. When it buzzed during dinner, the rare times we had dinner together, she'd glance at it and smile this little smile before putting it away without explaining who'd messaged her. One morning, I woke up before her, and her phone was charging on my side of the bed. I didn't pick it up. I want to be clear about that because what came later made me question everything about who I was as a man and a husband. But I saw the screen light up with a text notification. Just the preview, nothing more. It said, Last night was perfect. Can't wait for San Francisco. The contact name was just DC, David Chen. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, my heart doing something between racing and stopping. Last night was perfect. She'd told me last night she was at a client dinner until 11. She'd come home smelling like wine, inexpensive food, and I'd been asleep when she crawled into bed. I'd woken up enough to feel her there, and I'd reached for her, and she'd said she was too tired. Could we just sleep? Can't wait for San Francisco. I got up and got ready for work, like a man moving underwater. Everything felt slow and heavy and unreal. At the community center that day, I could barely focus. Darius asked me if I was okay. And this kid, this 15-year-old kid, with his own problems, living in a shelter with his mom and 2 brothers, looked at me with concern, like somehow he could see I was breaking. "I'm good, man," I lied. "Just tired." That night, I asked Elena about San Francisco, as casually as I could manage. "Hey, baby, you mentioned something about a trip to San Francisco coming up?" She was at the counter, pouring wine, her back to me. I saw her shoulders tense for just a second before she turned around with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh yeah, it's a conference. 3 days. David and I are presenting on emerging markets. It's next month." "You didn't mention it before?" "Didn't I? I must have forgotten. Things have been crazy at work." She didn't look at me when she said it. She looked at her wine glass, at the counter, at the window, anywhere but at me. And I knew. I didn't know details, didn't know specifics, but I knew something was wrong. Something was being hidden. Something was happening that I wasn't supposed to see. I started paying attention, really paying attention, like I was investigating my own life, collecting evidence of its dissolution. I noticed that every time David was mentioned, Elena's voice changed, became animated, became soft. I noticed that her work dinners always seemed to be with David or David's clients. I noticed that when she talked about her achievements, she always credited David. David recommended me for this. David gave me this account. David thinks I should aim for partner by next year. In September, she went to that San Francisco conference. She was gone Thursday through Sunday, 4 days, and the entire time she barely texted me. Just quick messages. "Busy day. Presentation went well. Flight home delayed." When she got back, she had this glow about her that I hadn't seen in years. She was happy, lighter. And it made me sick because she never looked that happy coming home to me anymore. "How was the trip?" I asked, and I hated how small my voice sounded, how much I needed her to make me believe everything was normal. "Exhausting, but productive. We landed 2 major clients. David was amazing. He's such a natural closer. David was amazing. Not we were amazing, or I did great. But David was amazing. I wanted to ask questions I was afraid to have answered. I wanted to demand explanations for the distance between us, for the way our marriage had become a shell we were both pretending still had substance. But fear is a powerful silence maker. I was afraid that if I pushed too hard, I'd confirm what I suspected, and then I'd have to do something about it. And I didn't know if I was strong enough to survive what that something might be. October came, and with it, Elena's 30th birthday. I planned a surprise party, called her friends, some colleagues I'd met at company events, booked a private room at her favorite restaurant. I wanted to show her. I still saw her, still celebrated her, still loved her, even though I was drowning in doubt. The party was beautiful. I'd spent money I didn't have on decorations and a cake from that bakery in Virginia Highland. Everyone came. Everyone except David, who sent his regrets and an arrangement of white orchids so expensive they looked like they belonged at a wedding. Elena smiled all night. She hugged me in front of everyone and said I was the best husband a woman could ask for. But when we got home and everyone was gone and it was just us, she didn't thank me again. She didn't pull me close and tell me she loved me. She checked her phone, said she was exhausted, and went to bed. I cleaned up the aftermath of the party alone, stacking plates, throwing away napkins, boxing up leftover cake. And I thought about how you can throw someone a party and still feel like you're losing them. How you can do everything right and still watch everything fall apart. November brought more late nights, more canceled plans, more of Elena being present in body, but absent in everything that mattered. She stopped asking about my day entirely. She'd come home at 9, 10, 11, and head straight to the shower without greeting me. She'd eat whatever I'd made or ordered in silence, scrolling through her phone. She'd go to bed early or stay up late, working in the spare bedroom we'd once talked about turning into a nursery. I was living with a ghost, or maybe I was the ghost. Right before Thanksgiving, Elena dropped a bomb so casual I almost missed its significance. David wants me to come to Singapore in January, she said over breakfast on a rare Saturday morning when we were both home. It's a huge opportunity. Meeting with international clients, potentially opening an Asian office. He specifically requested me. How long would you be gone? 2 weeks, maybe 3. 3 weeks, halfway around the world. With David. That's a long time, I said carefully. She looked up from her phone, and her eyes were cold. Marcus, this is my career. This is everything I've worked for. I need you to be supportive, not clingy. Clingy. That's what I'd become to her. Clingy for wanting my wife to be present in our marriage. Clingy for expecting partnership. Clingy for hoping that maybe she'd choose me over David Chen for once in the 3 years since we'd moved to this city that was hers and would never be mine. I'm always supportive, I said quietly. Good, she responded and went back to her phone. That afternoon, I took a long drive. Just me and my thoughts, and the highway stretching out toward nowhere in particular. I ended up at Piedmont Park, sitting on a bench, watching families, fathers playing with their kids, couples walking hand in hand, people living the life Elena and I had said we wanted. And I let myself feel everything I'd been pushing down for years. The anger, the hurt, the humiliation, the bone-deep exhaustion of loving someone who'd stopped loving me back. My phone rang. It was Janine. And when I answered, she knew immediately something was wrong. Marcus, baby brother, what's going on? I told her everything. About the late nights, and the distance, and the phone behavior, and David Chen, and how I felt like I was disappearing. About how I'd sacrificed everything for Elena's career. And now I was broke, and small, and invisible. About how I didn't know if she was cheating or if I was paranoid. But either way, I'd lost her somewhere along the road. And I didn't know how to find my way back to us. Janine listened without interrupting, and when I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Marcus, listen to me. You need to know what's really happening, not what you hope is happening, not what you're afraid is happening, what's really happening. Because right now, you're living in uncertainty, and uncertainty is killing you. Find out the truth, baby. Whatever it is, knowing is better than this. What if the truth is what I think it is? Then at least you'll know what you're dealing with, and you can decide what you want to do about it. But Marcus, if she's betraying you, if she's using you, if she's making a fool of you, that's not on you. That's on her. You've been a good husband. You've sacrificed everything. Don't you dare let her make you feel like you're the problem. After we hung up, I sat on that bench until the sun started setting, and I made a decision. I was going to find out the truth. I didn't know how yet, but I was done living in the dark, done making excuses, done pretending everything was fine when my whole world felt like it was built on lies. The truth was coming, whether I was ready for it or not. December 2019 rolled in cold and unforgiving, the kind of cold that gets into your bones and reminds you that winter is just another word for endings. Elena was busier than ever, preparing for this Singapore trip that loomed over our marriage like a storm cloud I couldn't see through. She was at the office more than she was home. And when she was home, she might as well have been a hologram. There, in image only, untouchable, unreachable. Christmas came and went with the efficiency of a business transaction. We exchanged gifts on Christmas morning. I'd gotten her a leather portfolio, embossed with her initials, practical and thoughtful. She'd gotten me a sweater from Nordstrom that still had the price tag on it, $59. The same amount she'd spend on a lunch without thinking twice. I wore it that day and told her I loved it. And we drove to Charlotte to spend the afternoon with Mama and Janine, because that's what you do on Christmas. You pretend everything's fine, so you don't ruin everyone else's holiday. But Mama saw through it. She sat next to me on her worn sofa after dinner, while Elena was in the kitchen helping Janine with dishes, and she put her hand on my knee. "You look tired, baby. Tired in your soul." I'd squeezed her hand but didn't say anything, because if I started talking, I'd start falling apart, and Christmas wasn't the day for that kind of truth. The new year came, and with it, Elena's departure date to Singapore. January 15th. 3 weeks, she'd said, but she'd packed enough for a month. I helped her with her luggage, 2 huge suitcases, and a carry-on. And I drove her to the airport, even though she'd said she could get a car service. I wanted those extra 30 minutes. I wanted to look at her profile as she stared out the passenger window, and I wanted to memorize her face in case this was the last time I'd see the woman I'd married before she became someone else completely. At the airport, I parked and walked her inside. Other couples were hugging goodbye, some of them crying, some of them kissing like the separation was unbearable. Elena gave me a quick hug, barely more than a pat on the back, and she said, "I'll text you when I land." "I love you," I told her. "Love you too," she said, already pulling away, already moving toward security, already gone. I drove home to our empty apartment, and I sat in the silence that had become the soundtrack of my life. 3 weeks. 3 weeks to figure out what I was going to do. 3 weeks to prepare myself for whatever truth was waiting when she came back, if she came back. That night, Darnell called me. "Man, I've been thinking about you. How you holding up?" "I'm good," I lied. "Marcus, don't do that. Don't lie to me. Elena's gone to Singapore with her mentor, And you're sitting there telling me you're good? What am I supposed to say, Dee? That I think my wife is having an affair? That I think I've been played for years? That I am my 50-year-old man who gave up everything for a woman who might not have ever really loved me? The words came out harder than I'd intended, sharper. And once they were out there, I couldn't take them back, couldn't pretend I hadn't said them, couldn't pretend I didn't believe them. Listen to me, Darnell said, his voice steady and serious. You need proof, not suspicions, not feelings, not fear, proof. Because if you confront her without it, she'll gaslight you. She'll make you think you're crazy. You need to know for certain what's happening, and then you need to decide what kind of man you're going to be. What kind of man do I want to be? The kind who doesn't let anybody make him feel worthless. The kind who knows his value, even when someone else forgot it. After we hung up, I thought about proof, about what that would look like, what that would mean. I thought about going through her emails, her phone records, her credit card statements. I thought about hiring a private investigator, about following her, about becoming someone I didn't recognize. In pursuit of truth, I was terrified to find. But I didn't do any of that, because some part of me still hoped I was wrong. Some part of me still believes that maybe Elena was just ambitious, just focused, just temporarily lost in her career, and would find her way back to us eventually. The days passed slowly while she was gone. I'd wake up, go to work at the community center, come home to silence, and repeat. The kids I worked with became my lifeline. Terrell, Darius, Jamal, little Marcus Jr., who was only 12, but reminded me so much of myself at that age. It hurt. They kept me anchored. They reminded me that I mattered to someone, even if it wasn't to my wife. Elena texted sporadically. Singapore is beautiful. Meeting's going well. Miss you. But her texts felt automated, generic, like she was checking a box labeled Update Husband on her to-do list. When I'd try to call, she'd say she was in meetings, or the time difference made it hard, or she was exhausted. Always an excuse. Always a reason why connecting was impossible. 2 weeks into her trip, I got a text from her at 3 a.m. Atlanta time. It must have been afternoon in Singapore. Extended another week. Big client wants to finalize contract in person. David thinks it's worth staying. Hope you understand. I stared at that text for an hour, and something crystallized in my chest. Not anger yet. That would come later. But clarity. Cold, hard clarity that this was who we were now. This was what our marriage had become. Me waiting at home, like a dog hoping its owner would come back, and her off building a life where I was at best a background character in her story. I texted back, I understand. But I didn't understand. I didn't understand how we'd gotten here. Didn't understand when I'd become so dispensable. Didn't understand why love, real love, sacrificial love, show up every day love wasn't enough. The 4th week of her absence, I made a decision. When she came home, I was going to surprise her at work. I was going to show up with flowers and take her to dinner, and I was going to tell her we needed to talk. Really talk. About us. About our marriage. About where we were headed. I was going to fight for us one more time. And if she couldn't meet me halfway, at least I'd know I'd tried everything. I picked a date, February 11th. It was a Tuesday, middle of the week. I took the afternoon off from the community center. I bought white roses from the florist on Ponce de Leon, her favorite flowers. I made reservations at Soto for 7 o'clock. I put on my best shirt. The blue one she'd said made my eyes look warm. I drove to Meridian Tower with hope and dread fighting for space in my chest. That's when everything changed. That's when the security guard with the kind eyes sent me around back. That's when I heard those women talking in the third-floor landing. That's when I learned that David Chen wasn't just her mentor. He was on the board of directors. He'd been recommending her for positions since day one. He'd been paving her path, while I'd been paving mine with sacrifices she'd never acknowledged. That's when I learned everyone knew. Everyone except me. I didn't go home that night. I couldn't. I drove aimlessly through Atlanta, rain beating against my windshield like it was trying to wash away what I'd learned, and I ended up at Darnell's house in Decatur at midnight. He opened the door in his pajamas, took one look at my face, and pulled me inside without a word. His wife, Keisha, made me tea I didn't drink, and I sat at their kitchen table and told them everything I'd heard in that stairwell. Chen is the same last name, I said, my voice hollow. She told me it was a coincidence. Common like Smith, she said, but he's on the board of directors. He's been recommending her for every position. Everyone knows they're connected. Everyone knows, except the idiot husband who moved his whole life for her. Darnell's jaw was tight. Keisha had tears in her eyes, and I sat there feeling like the biggest fool who'd ever lived. "What are you going to do?" Darnell asked. "I don't know. Confront her? Demand the truth? What if I'm wrong? What if there's an explanation?" "Marcus," Keisha said softly, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "Baby, you're not wrong. You know you're not wrong. Women don't defend men that hard. Don't light up around them like that. Don't spend every waking hour with them if there's nothing there. You know what this is." I spent the night on their couch, staring at the ceiling, replaying 5 years of my marriage, like a movie where I could finally see the plot I'd missed the first time. Every late night, every defensive reaction, when I'd asked questions, every time she'd made me feel crazy for being concerned, every time she'd prioritized David over me, our marriage, our future. The next morning I drove to Meridian Tower again, but this time I didn't go in. I sat in my car across the street and waited. At 7:45, David Chen's black Mercedes pulled into the executive parking garage. At 8:10, Elena's silver BMW followed. They arrived separately, professional, careful. But 30 minutes later, I watched them walk into a Starbucks 2 blocks away, and through the window, I saw them sit close. Saw him touch her hand across the table. Saw her laugh in a way she hadn't laughed with me in 3 years. I took pictures. Not because I wanted to, but because Darnell's voice was in my head. "You need proof." They stayed in that Starbucks for 40 minutes. When they left, they walked back toward the office building, and before they turned the corner into the parking garage, he put his hand on the small of her back. Just for a second. Just long enough for me to see what I'd been refusing to see for years. That afternoon, I called a lawyer. Her name was Patricia Monroe, and she'd been recommended by one of the mothers at the community center who'd gone through a divorce herself. Patricia was a black woman in her 60s, with gray locks and eyes that had seen every kind of heartbreak humanity had to offer. "Tell me what's happening," she said, and I told her everything. When I finished, She leaned back in her chair and sighed. Mr. Thompson, I'm going to be straight with you. If your wife has been having an affair with someone she works with, especially someone who's been advancing her career, you may have grounds for a fault divorce. But Georgia is a no-fault state, which means it doesn't always matter. What matters is assets, debts, and whether you want to fight. I don't have anything to fight with, I said. She makes all the money. The apartment's in her name. The BMW's in her name. I'm just the guy who makes $38,000 at a community center. But you sacrificed your career for hers. You moved for her job. That matters. And if there's been infidelity with someone who's financially benefited her, that could be considered marital misconduct, affecting the economic partnership. Patricia pulled out a legal pad and started taking notes. I need you to document everything. Texts, emails, photos, financial records, every late night, every business trip, every unexplained expense. Build a timeline. And Mr. Thompson, don't confront her yet. Not until you have everything you need. Because once you confront her, she'll hide everything you haven't already secured. I left that office feeling like I'd crossed a line I couldn't uncross. I was building a case against my wife. I was preparing for war when I'd spent 5 years trying to keep the peace. For the next 2 weeks, I became someone I didn't recognize. I went through our bank statements. Elena had always handled the finances, said it was easier since she made more money. I found charges at expensive hotels in cities where she'd claimed to be at conferences. I found jewelry purchases I'd never seen her wear. I found charges to restaurants. On nights, she'd said she was working late at the office. I logged into our wireless account and printed phone records. Hundreds of calls to David Chen's number. Calls that lasted an hour, 2 hours. Calls at midnight, at 2 in the morning. Texts I couldn't access, but could see the volume of 50, 60 texts a day between them. I felt sick, physically sick. But I kept going because Patricia was right. I needed proof. Not for me anymore. I already knew. But for what was coming. Elena came home from Singapore on February 20th, a Thursday. She texted me from the airport. Landing soon. Can you pick me up? I picked her up. She looked good, tanned, rested, like the trip had refreshed her. She hugged me at baggage claim, and I felt nothing. Or maybe I felt everything. But it was all dark and cold. I missed you, she said. Did you? The words came out before I could stop them. She pulled back and looked at me strangely. Of course I did. Marcus, what's wrong? We need to talk. Can it wait? I'm exhausted. Let me just get home and shower and sleep, and we can talk tomorrow. No, I said. It can't wait. We drove home in silence, so thick I could barely breathe through it. Elena kept glancing at me, and I could see her mind working, trying to figure out what had changed, what I knew. When we got to the apartment, she went straight to pour herself wine, like she always did. But I stayed by the door, my arms crossed, and I watched her like I was seeing her for the first time. What's going on? She asked, and there was an edge to her voice. Defensiveness, already forming. Tell me about David Chen. The wine glass stopped halfway to her mouth. What about him? Tell me about your relationship with him, the real relationship, not the mentor story you've been selling me for 5 years. Marcus, I don't know what you think He's on the board of directors. My voice was calm, which surprised me. I'd expected to yell, to rage, But instead, I was cold. He recommended you for every position you've gotten at Meridian. He's been paving your career path since Charlotte. And you never thought to mention that your mentor shares your last name and happens to be married, which is why you're always so careful about how you describe him. Elena set down the wineglass. Her face went pale, then red, then pale again. Who told you that? Does it matter? Is it true? Marcus, you don't understand the situation. Then help me understand. Help me understand why everyone at your company knows about your relationship with David, except me. Help me understand why you've been taking trips with him, having dinners with him, calling him at midnight. Help me understand why you've made me feel crazy for 3 years when I was asking reasonable questions about your mentor, who you're around more than you're around your own husband. She moved toward me, her hands up like she was approaching a wild animal. Baby, you're overreacting. Yes, David has helped my career. Yes, we work closely together. But it's not what you think. What do I think, Elena? Say it. What do I think? You think I'm having an affair. She said it like the idea was ridiculous, like I was being dramatic and insecure. Are you? The question hung in the air between us like smoke. And in that moment, I saw her make a choice. I saw her decide how she was going to play this. She could tell the truth, or she could double down on the lie. She doubled down. No. Marcus, no. I can't believe you'd even ask me that. David is my colleague. He's been instrumental in my success, yes, but there's nothing romantic between us. He's married. I'm married. This is professional. I pulled out my phone and showed her the pictures I'd taken. Her and David at Starbucks. His hand on her back. The body language that told a story words couldn't hide. Explain that then. Explain why you look at him like that. Explain why he touches you like that. Her face crumbled, but not with remorse, with anger. You followed me. You've been spying on me? I've been trying to understand why my wife became a stranger, why our marriage feels like a business arrangement where I'm the junior partner nobody consults. This is insane. She was pacing now, her voice rising. You're acting paranoid and controlling. So David and I are close. So what? That's how business works. You'd know that if you hadn't given up on your own career to play savior to kids who probably won't amount to anything anyway. The words hit like a slap. The contempt in her voice when she talked about my work, about the kids I'd poured my heart into while she was building her empire on lies. Don't, I said quietly. Don't you dare talk about those kids. They're more real than anything you've built. Oh, please, you act like you're some kind of hero because you make $38,000 teaching basketball to teenagers. Meanwhile, I'm out here securing our future, and all you can do is question me and make me feel guilty for being successful. I don't make you feel guilty for being successful. I make you feel guilty for lying, for putting David Chen before your marriage, for making me sacrifice everything while you sacrificed nothing. I sacrificed nothing. Her laugh was sharp and bitter. I sacrificed living in a nice house because you insisted we stay in the city. I sacrificed having children because you wanted to wait until we were stable. I sacrificed being with someone who actually respected my ambition. She stopped. Too late. The words were already out. Being with someone who respected your ambition, I repeated slowly. Someone like David. She closed her eyes. That's not what I meant. Yes, it is. That's exactly what you meant. How long, Elena? How long have you been sleeping with him? I'm not. Don't lie to me anymore. My voice cracked, finally breaking. I can't take any more lies. I've spent 5 years making excuses for you, defending you to myself, trying to be the man you needed me to be. And all this time, you've been with him. So just tell me the truth. How long? Silence stretched between us like a chasm. Then quietly, she said, 3 years. 3 years. The number echoed in my head like a gunshot. 3 years meant it started in 2017, less than a year after we moved to Atlanta. 3 years meant it had been happening the whole time I was taking a lesser job, swallowing my pride, supporting her dreams. 3 years meant every time she'd told me she loved me, every time she'd let me hold her, every time she'd pretended we had a future together, she'd been lying. I sat down on the couch because my legs wouldn't hold me anymore. 3 years. Elena was crying now, but I felt nothing watching her tears. They looked fake, performed like everything else about her had turned out to be. Marcus, please let me explain. Explain what? Explain how you've been sleeping with your boss while I've been home alone? Explain how you've been building a life with him while I've been waiting for you to remember we were married? What exactly do you want to explain, Elena? It's complicated. David and I, we didn't mean for it to happen. We were working late one night, and we just connected. And stop. I held up my hand. Don't give me the romantic story. Don't make this sound like some kind of fairy tale that just happened to you. You made choices every single day. For 3 years, you chose him over me. You chose to lie to me, to use me, to make me feel like I was crazy for noticing what everyone else could see. You don't understand the pressure I was under, the pressure you were under. I stood up, and something in me snapped. I gave up everything for you. I left my job, my city, my family, my friends. I took a position, making a quarter of what I used to make, so you could focus on your career. I supported you through every late night, every business trip, every time you told me you were too tired or too busy or too stressed, and you repay me by sleeping with your married boss and spending my marriage making me feel like I was the problem. David is separated, she said, and her voice had gone quiet. He and his wife have been living separate lives for years. They stay married for appearances, for the business connections, but they're not really together. And that's supposed to make this better? That he's cheating on his wife too? That you're helping him destroy his marriage while you're destroying ours? His marriage was already dead. And Marcus, be honest, so was ours. We've been roommates for years. When's the last time we had sex? When's the last time you made me feel desired instead of obligated? The blame shifting was masterful. She was making this my fault, making it seem like I'd driven her into another man's arms by not being enough, not doing enough, not making her feel special enough. You killed us, I said, and my voice was steady now, empty of everything except truth. Not me, you. You made choices that destroyed what we had. And then you blamed me for not being happy in the ruins you created. That's not love, Elena. That's abuse. Don't be dramatic. I want a divorce. The words came out clear and simple. No anger, no grief, just fact. Elena stared at me like I'd spoken a language she didn't understand. Marcus, wait. We can work through this. We can go to counseling. No, we can't. Because you don't love me. Maybe you never did. Maybe I was just, convenient. Just the stable guy who'd support your ambitions, while you chased whatever made you feel important. But I'm done being convenient. I'm done being invisible. I'm done being married to someone who treats me like a burden instead of a partner. So, that's it? You're just giving up? I'm not giving up. I'm choosing myself. For the first time in 5 years, I'm choosing myself. Elena's tears had stopped. Now she was looking at me with something that might have been respect or might have been contempt. I couldn't tell anymore, didn't care to figure it out. Fine, she said. If that's what you want, fine. But don't expect me to make this easy for you. This apartment is mine. That car you drive is in my name. Everything we have, I paid for. So if you want to leave, leave. But you'll leave with nothing. And there it was. The truth of who she'd always been underneath the performance. Cold, calculating, cruel. I don't want anything from you, I said. Keep it all. The apartment, the car, the life you built on lies. I just want out. I grabbed my keys, my wallet, and the overnight bag I'd never unpacked from my trip to Darnell's house. Elena watched me walk to the door, and just before I left, she said something that would haunt me for a long time. You were never going to be enough for me, Marcus. You were good and kind and safe, but I needed more than that. I needed someone who could match my ambition, someone who operated at my level. David gets me in ways you never could. So maybe this is for the best. Maybe we both deserve better. I looked at her one last time, this woman I'd loved, this stranger wearing her face, and I said, you're right. I do deserve better. And somewhere out there is a woman who will appreciate good and kind and safe, who will value loyalty over ambition and truth over appearances. You're not that woman. You never were. I left and didn't look back. The divorce took 6 months to finalize. Patricia Monroe fought for me harder than anyone ever had. She documented every late-night phone call, every suspicious charge, every business trip that aligned with David Shen's travel schedule. She proved that Elena's career advancement had been directly tied to an inappropriate relationship with a board member, which constituted marital misconduct. She argued that I'd sacrificed my earning potential based on promises Elena had made about our future, promises she'd broken while pursuing an extramarital affair. In the end, I walked away with $75,000, my portion of our savings, and a settlement for my career sacrifice. It wasn't much, but it was enough to start over. Elena and David's affair became public knowledge at Meridian 3 months after I filed for divorce. Someone leaked it to HR, and the company launched an investigation into nepotism and ethics violations. David Chin was asked to resign from the board. Elena was demoted and eventually pushed out. The empire she'd built on compromised foundations crumbled faster than she'd built it. And I'd be lying if I said watching it fall didn't feel like justice. But here's what surprised me. I didn't feel as satisfied as I'd thought I would. Because revenge doesn't heal you. Justice doesn't erase the years you lost. Watching someone who hurt you face consequences doesn't automatically make you whole. The real healing started in unexpected places. I stayed at Darnell and Keisha's house for 3 weeks after I left Elena, sleeping on their couch, trying to remember who I was before I'd become someone's discarded husband. Then I found a small apartment in West End, Nothing fancy, but it was mine. I furnished it slowly with second-hand finds and felt richer than I'd ever felt in that expensive midtown apartment, with floor-to-ceiling windows and a doorman who pitied me. The kids at the community center became my anchor. Terrell had gotten a full scholarship to Georgia Tech. Darius was writing poetry that made grown men cry. Jamal had stayed out of trouble for 2 years straight and was talking about becoming a social worker. They threw me a birthday party, my 50th, and decorated the gym with balloons and a cake that said, "Best mentor ever." And I cried in front of 50 teenagers who'd taught me more about resilience than I'd ever taught them. Mama came to visit in August 2020, right when the world was falling apart with the pandemic. She stayed for 2 weeks, and we sat on my small balcony drinking coffee and watching the neighborhood wake up every morning. "You look different," she said one morning. "Lighter, like you finally put down something heavy you'd been carrying too long." "I feel different," I admitted. "It still hurts sometimes. But it's a clean hurt, not that infected hurt from living a lie." "That woman did you wrong," Mama said. "But she also did you a favor. She showed you who she was before you wasted any more years on her. Some people learn that lesson too late. You got out while you still had life left to live." She was right. At 50 years old, I was starting over. But I wasn't starting from nothing. I was starting from truth. I threw myself into my work. The community center promoted me to program director with a salary bump to $60,000. Not much compared to what Elena made, but it felt like wealth because I'd earned it honestly. I developed new programs, wrote grants, brought in funding. I started a mentorship initiative pairing at-risk boys with men who'd overcome similar circumstances, and we called it Second Chapters, because everyone deserves another chance to write their story. I reconnected with old friends from Charlotte. I started dating again. Nothing serious at first, just coffee dates and dinners with women who liked that I was genuine instead of flashy, who valued kindness over corporate success. I learned what it felt like to be chosen, not settled for, to be seen, not looked through. In December 2020, Janine called me with news that changed everything again. Mama's diabetes had gotten worse. She needed someone with her full time, and Janine was struggling to manage it while teaching. Without hesitation, I moved back to Charlotte. I found a job at a community center there, similar to my work in Atlanta, and I moved into Mama's house to take care of her. People might say I was sacrificing again, giving up my life for someone else, but it didn't feel like sacrifice. It felt like purpose. Taking care of the woman who'd sacrificed everything for me, that wasn't loss. That was love in its truest form. Elena texted me once during this time, January 2021. "I heard about your mom. I'm sorry. I hope she's okay." I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say to her. She was a chapter I'd closed, a lesson I'd learned, a version of myself I'd outgrown. I'm writing this now in September 2025, sitting on my mama's back porch in the house where I grew up. Mama's health has stabilized. We got her diabetes under control, and she's thriving with the care and attention she deserves. She's 78 now, still sharp as a tack, still making the best collard greens in North Carolina. 5 years have passed since that rainy Tuesday when my marriage died in an alley behind Meridian Tower. 5 years since I learned that everyone knew except me. 5 years since I chose myself for the first time in half a decade. And here's what I've learned. Betrayal doesn't define you unless you let it. Loss doesn't destroy you unless you refuse to rebuild. And sometimes the life you thought you wanted turns out to be a prison you needed to escape. I'm happy now. Not in that loud, flashy way that needs to be posted and performed, but in that quiet, deep way that comes from knowing who you are and being okay with it. I'm 55 years old. I make an honest living doing work that matters. I take care of my mama. I mentor kids who need someone to believe in them. I have friends who show up, who call to check on me, who value my presence in their lives. Last month, I met someone. Her name is Michelle. She's a teacher, a widow, a woman who's been through her own battles and came out stronger. We met at a community event, started talking about our work with kids, and realized we had more in common than our careers. She's beautiful and real, and she laughs at my jokes, and she holds my hand like it matters. We're taking it slow, but there's something there, something honest, something that doesn't require me to disappear to make room for her light. I heard through mutual connections that Elena and David got married last year. Good for them. I mean that without sarcasm. They deserve each other. Two people who value ambition over integrity, success over honesty, appearances over truth. I hope they're happy. I hope they never hurt anyone else the way they hurt their spouses. But mostly I don't think about them at all anymore. Here's what I want you to understand. If you're watching this and you've been where I was, your value isn't determined by someone else's ability to see it. Your worth isn't diminished because someone treated you as disposable. The person who leaves you for someone else isn't winning. They're just repeating patterns that'll eventually catch up with them. You deserve love that's honest, partnership that's equal, someone who chooses you on the bad days and the boring days, not just when it's convenient or beneficial. And if you're in a relationship right now where you feel invisible, where you're sacrificing everything and getting nothing back, so where you're being made to feel crazy for asking reasonable questions, get out. You're not crazy. You're not insecure. You're being manipulated, and you deserve better. The day I found peace wasn't the day Elena left my life. It was the day I stopped letting her absence define my future. Peace came when I forgave myself for being fooled, for staying too long, for believing in someone who didn't deserve my belief. Peace came when I looked in the mirror and recognized the man looking back, not perfect, not unscathed, but whole. That security guard at Meridian Tower with the kind eyes did me the biggest favor of my life, sending me around back that day. Because sometimes you need to see the ugly truth before you can build something beautiful. Sometimes you need to lose everything before you understand what actually matters. Sometimes the worst day of your life is the first day of your freedom. I'm Marcus Thompson. I'm 55 years old. I live in Charlotte, North Carolina. I take care of my mama. I mentor kids who need hope. And I'm learning how to love again without fear. My story didn't end in that alley 5 years ago. That's where it began. If you've made it this far, if this story resonated with you, do me a favor. Hit that like button, subscribe to hear more of these tales, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Because your story matters too. And wherever you are in your journey, whether you're in the middle of the storm or coming out the other side, Know that you're not alone. Peace don't come cheap, but it's worth every sacrifice you make to find it. Thank you for listening to mine.